Hey guys, this is Chck Bryant coming live from the WOTG Radio Network and WOTG Studios live in Dalton and Cleveland, Tennessee. We've got a very special guest with us on the phone tonight. This gentleman has been around in country music and gospel music since the late 70s, early 80s. He has been with such talents as Roy Clark, Marty Robbins, Johnny Cash, and some of the other greats that are out there that are now gone. George Jones, Tammy Wynette, some of the great people that helped start country music. He told me stories about the old possum and some of the other great stories. So you've got to, if you get a chance to ever talk to Mr. Purdue, you really got to get with him. But he's on our show tonight. We've got some great music lined up for him tonight. And one of my favorite songs that off of this is we're taking our I'm taking my country back, and we're kids. Harvey, what's the name of the other album?
The other album is We're All American Kids.
Okay, that's got a good tune to it. Well,
it's really almost historical parts of it of my family.
Right.
And I wrote it probably back in about 2008 or 9, and it just kind of ended up being the album title. And I sent my work to Nashville, and I told them, I said, I want you to make me look like the father of our country. And so they did. And when I got it back, I was one of the faces that was on the mount that Donald Trump spoke at here a few weeks ago.
Well, I didn't want to.
I got cracked up when I saw it, because they really did it, And people says, "That's you." I said, "That's me,"
Well, I hate to let you know that Donald Trump is kind of wanting to take Theodore Roosevelt out of there and put his face up there. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, we took Lincoln off, put mine up there. They said.
That's exactly what they did. Well, tell us this one song, I'm Taking My Country Back. Tell me a little bit about that song.
I wrote that about 7 years ago, and it was when we were hearing all about the terrorist attack and how that we were all but under fire at time and siege because of all that was happening in our cities and towns, and it's even worse today, And so I sat down and wrote that, and it just kind of flowed, and it kind of fit, And then I got with some guys, and I got with them, and we cut a track on it. And so then we finished the track up, and we put it out, and it's doing really well right now, If the timing of that song could not be any better, with what's happening. And, I remember every day in school, we would stand and we would say the pledge and the Lord's Prayer. And we would lay our hand on our heart, and the principal would lead us in those. And how we need prayer back in our school now, Brother Chck. Kids don't even know how to say the Lord's Prayer today,
Right.
And I guess we grew up in a really wonderful time, and it's taken us all that's happening in the world for us to see just how wonderful our country was when we were growing up, Because I can remember church. I remember businesses closed on Sunday because of the blue law,
Yeah.
And usually on Sunday, we ate at home, and Mama would fix a fried chicken, man, and gravy and mashed potatoes and green beans. Boy, let me tell you what, there was chicken every Sunday,
Yeah.
But I was thinking about that, and there's a line in there. It says, "In God we trust today." And you know how hard they're trying to get "In God we trust" off of our currency and everything else. We trust God. This country has trusted God from the beginning. You read George Washington's prayer and all that's happened in our country. Without God, there would be no United States. You know it?
Right.
And in God we trust today. And it says, I salute the Union Jack. And people will say, where'd you get that? Well, the Union Jack is British, but it's also the Stars and Stripes, too.
Amen.
And, I salute the Union Jack. I'm taking my country back. And I think we as Christians, we need to be more visible today than ever before. And we need to express our feelings. And let me tell you something. Without the Bible, this world goes straight to hell. You know it?
Right.
And if we ever need it, I find people that don't even really know. There's like a couple of generations that have been lost, that don't even understand God, that don't even understand the grace of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. And let me tell you something, man. This country, we have to make it, because if we don't, what's going to happen in the whole world,
True.
And so I decided, I know somebody might say, well, that's a rebel song, that's militant. No, it's the truth. Why should we let what our forefathers built and our dads and grandpas and all of them fought for, why should we let the enemy take that away from us?
Right.
This is our country, brother.
Last time I checked, it was.
I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, man. And, I'm so thankful that I was born and raised in the U.S. I've been to Mexico, and I've seen it, and I can understand why they want to come across that border. Hey, if I was there, I'd want to come across too. You know it?
Well, the thing that gets me, Harvey, is everybody wants to come to America. And
yes.
if you look, and I put this out there, we have 53 states. And even though the president has not given the order for Puerto Rico or the Wakeland Islands or Guam or the Virgin Islands that is a part of the country, we let the Philippines go back years ago, and look what happened to the Philippines. And I mean, we as Americans need to stand up. And there's a lady by the name of Lizzie G. She wrote a song called "American Heroes." And a good friend of mine named Dusty Alderman, he wrote a song, just a little one about, just a little bit about your song, and his is like, we don't. They took prayer out of school, and they have taken every little bit of freedom that you may have, and people. I remember back in the 70s, I lived in the country and I lived in the city. And I'm an old city boy. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm from New Orleans, and you can't get no more city than that. But I graduated high school from Dalton, Georgia. I graduated from a school called Northwest. I've lived in St. Pete. I've lived in Fort Myers. I've lived in Oldsmar, Florida. And to me, when you can't leave your car unlocked, you can't leave your doors unlocked, you can't open the windows when there's a nice cool breeze outside. I remember in the summertime growing up in Adams County, Ohio, where my sister lives at, living on the old farm where you just parked the car right outside, you left the windows down, you didn't have to worry about somebody coming up and stealing something from you. You may have a passer go by that might want some water or something that's walking through the fields and stuff instead of being on the highway. And the thing about it is, but now if you lived in the country, you got to lock your doors. You gotta lock the barn. You gotta make sure that you take the keys out of the tractor. I remember Daddy leaving the keys in the tractor behind the barn because you can't do that. So let's go ahead and listen to this song. And folks, I really want you to listen to the lyrics of this song because this is something that you really need to hear. And we've had so much since 2011 dealing with the people that brought down the Twin Towers and the people that was with ISIS. We need to take our country back. Let's listen to this song.
Yes.
All right, hang on. Here it comes.
We need prayer back in our schools and the Pledge of Allegiance too. Instead of the evolution, we need to learn the golden rule. In God we trust today. There is no other way. I salute the Union Jack. I'm taking my country back. Sometimes we just sit back and let things take their course. And then we grumble and complain because we have no recourse in parades of evil and hate. They curse and burn our flag. I'm tired of this sneaky attack. Son, I'm taking my country back. We need prayer back in our schools and the Pledge of Allegiance too. Instead of the evolution, we need to learn the golden rule. In God we trust today. There is no other way. I salute the Union Jack. I'm taking my country back. What's happened to the USA and the good old American way? Crockett died for the Alamo. He wouldn't give it to Mexico. Where's your Yankee pride? Are you red-blooded Dixie inside? Before another terrorist attack, son, I'm taking my country back. We need prayer back in our schools and the Pledge of Allegiance too. Instead of the evolution, we need to learn the golden rule. In God we trust today. There is no other way. I salute the Union Jack. Son, I'm taking my country back. We need prayer back in our schools and the Pledge of Allegiance too. Instead of the evolution, we need to learn the golden rule. In God we trust today. There is no other way. I salute the Union Jack. Son, I'm taking my country back. I salute the Union Jack. Son, I'm taking my country back. Yeah, we gonna take it back. It don't belong to them, it's ours. Come on, y'all, help me out. Let's take it back now.
Harvey, that last little bit, you know who I thought was playing that for a minute?
Do what now?
That last little bit, the guitar solo that was going there, I thought it was Jimi Hendrix for a second. Because, you know, he was a true American.
Oh, yeah, he was. He really was.
And he loved America. This next song that we're coming up with is going to be off of We're All American Kids.
We're All American Kids.
And
my grandma, she was Cherokee, and that tells a little bit about my family. And then it includes all 50 states as far as the continental U.S.
Right.
And that song, man, every time I sing that song out, like special events, 4th of July, people go crazy. Man, they're raving with me. And it's a fun song.
Well, the song that I'm going to pull off is Hometown Heroes. Tell me a little bit about that.
What do you think about Hometown Heroes, man?
Well, you know, I was listening to it, and I remember living up in Ohio. And one year I got to help put the flags on the graves at the cemetery in Manchester,
Yeah.
and that's where my great grandparents and my grandparents both lay, and several people in our family. My grandmother and her brother both are buried in the cemetery. I got a baby cousin that's buried there, and I've also got one of my uncles that are buried there. My dad's brother and my aunt on my daddy's side, her husband's there too. And
Yeah.
when I was going through there, that was before everybody had passed away. I think this was like in the early '80s. I was going through the cemetery, and I was wanting to count all the American heroes that was there, from where, if it didn't matter if it was from World War
Yeah.
One, World War II, Vietnam, Korea. And I started noticing as I was going through their awards that I had never even heard of.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there thinking about, you know, our family is related to Daniel Boone. And as I was walking through the cemetery, I was thinking about the heroes. And like I said, this has been a long time ago, that I remember Daniel Boone's son getting killed at the Battle of Blue Licks. And a lot of people don't know, but that was an Indian war that was taking place in Kentucky,
Yes.
right outside of Maysville, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
And then the Alamo. And and all the Davy Crockett, David Bowie, the one that built the knife, and other people that were there, senators and everything else, fighting in the war at the Alamo. And then the wars with Teddy Roosevelt and the Raiders, and the Civil War, and and then the Revolutionary War, because Manchester was around at that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't know that there was a very young George Washington that was doing the surveying for Ohio back then. And and we had a president that stayed in town back then, and that was President Polk. So the town had a lot of history to it. They made buttons. That was one of the biggest button factories there. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of history that if you travel up and down the West Coast and the East Coast and stuff, a lot of stuff is there. And then when you go all the way out to California, you had the gold rush. You go up to Alaska, you go to Hawaii. There was a lot of things that people didn't realize that has happened, because what have they done? They have closed the history books, and now we tell history of a different side, and we have closed the history. But having a hometown hero, does a person really know what a hometown hero is?
Well, and that's what I tried to portray in that song. It talks about a school teacher first. Then it talks about the guy that cut my hair when I was a little boy. He was actually had a barbershop there in South Memphis named Alvin Sloan, And, I mean, it's really what hometown heroes are all about, And to me, a hometown hero is someone, it don't matter about the economy of the town or how bad things get. They never leave. They're there. And they stay through the thick and the thin, And those hometown heroes, a lot of people never recognize, because they're just in everyday life, like a school teacher, And that's what this song says, man, And I mean, I was really trying to just hone in on people that I knew and lives that I knew. The last one talks about a Baptist preacher, okay? And he couldn't read. My daddy had a third grade education and couldn't read when God called him to preach, it?
Right.
And Daddy, with the third grade education, the Lord taught my daddy to read. After fasting and prayer, he could read the Bible, but he couldn't read a magazine. He couldn't read any newspaper. But my dad and mom founded 12 churches in 37 years.
Wow.
In Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi. And, when I look at that, Pop was quite a hero. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, when you mention that, you look back at, you was talking about your barber. My barber that cut my hair when I was 5 years old
Yes.
is still cutting my hair today. And he's way up into his 70s. I guess he's in his mid 70s. And he cut my hair back. My first haircut I got, Claude cut my hair way back in the day. My grandfather took me down there.
Yeah.
And we, every time we go in, we always talk about Papaw. And to me, my grandfather was just like Billy Graham, because he was the Billy Graham of this area. Because my Papaw preached from all the way to Ellijay, Georgia, Cleveland, Tennessee, all the way over into Pigeon Forge and those areas, all the way over into Alabama. To me, he was a traveling evangelist, but he had a church.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and listen to this, and we got a couple more songs on this album that we're going to play, but Hometown Heroes. Let us know what you think, people.
Now Anna Jones, she's all alone since her husband died. They celebrated 50 years by each other's side. When she talks about him, there's a tear in her eye. She says, I sure miss Willie. Sometimes it makes me cry. I see her every morning as she slowly makes her way. She always smiles and says hello. It's such a lovely day. For 40 years as a teacher, she always taught the 3rd grade. She's a pillow of our town that won't ever fade away. She's lived here on First Street most of her life. A lot of folks have moved away and left this town behind. Through the good and the bad times, she would never leave. She's truly a hometown hero to me. Oh, Alvin Sloan, he's always been one of my best friends. I got my first haircut sitting in his barber's chair. His shop was on the corner, right on the courthouse square. You got a handful of bubble gum each time you cut your hair. Barber shop's been gone for quite a while. There's a new bank on the corner, made with granite tiles. Now Alvin's in a nursing home on the outskirts of town. I've got a break from his shop when they tore that building down. Sloan's barber shop was on the square for 30 years. It's a monument to this town, but it seems nobody cares. Now Alvin's out of business and time moves on, you see. But he's truly a hometown hero to me. There's Preacher Brown, he started the First Baptist Church. It was a little white wooden building with a floor made of dirt. Grandpa was a deacon, and Grandma sang in the choir. That's where Mom and Dad got me before it was destroyed by the fire. Now Brother Brown is laid to rest just north of the new sanctuary. His headstone reads, a great man of God who was just ordinary. But he won't be ordinary, 'cause he couldn't read. A man of God for sure, a hometown hero to me. A man of God for sure, a hometown hero to me. These are just a few hometown heroes to me.
Folks, as y'all listening to that song, think about the heroes that came from your town. Think about the people that were in your county. Think about the people that were in your state. I know as growing up in Louisiana and Ohio, I can tell you a lot that went on in Ohio that a lot of people didn't know. Hometown heroes, state heroes, and everything else. Ohio holds the largest name of presidents in the country. And those are people of American heroes that have fought in wars and stuff. Did you know that, Brother Harvey? You still there?
Yeah.
Did you know that Ohio held the highest of the presidents from any state in the Union?
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
But
president.
I like what you said in that those people are just as important as the president, as Congress, or the House,
That's it.
because those are the people that really the politicians work for.
Right.
And without the hometown heroes, this country would be nothing.
Well, you figure if you start in the townships and the parishes and the counties, and if you don't know what a township is a single body. It's just like having a mayor in a county. It's a township.
Yeah.
In Ohio, they have hundreds of townships. In Louisiana, we have parishes, and in other places,
Yes.
they're counties. And if you
Yes.
take the people that make sure the roads are taken care of, you take the ones that are the city mayors that try to take care of the little bitty cities, the cities are dying in America. You know,
Yes.
we got to put the American heroes. I like that song, Brother Harvey. I really do. Next one up.
Well,
Go ahead.
it's never really been released to radio, and I wish it had been, because I think the song has a whole lot of merit.
Brother, it just got played on radio.
Huh?
I said
Excuse me?
it just got played on radio, brother.
Yeah. And, I mean, Alvin Sloan was alive, and the thing that I remember so much is after every haircut, he'd give you a handful of bubble gum, okay?
Yep.
And, I mean, him and Daddy and all of them would talk, that barbershop, man, all of the town history and everything was talked about there, But I remember him, and he was so gracious. I never got a haircut there that he didn't give me bubble gum, man.
Yeah, you figure, remember old Ray Stevens when you go to the Claude and Raymond, when Raymond was alive, you'd go down there to get your haircut in Tunnel Hill. And I always did believe that. I believe Ray Stevens must have talked about Raymond and Claude about how they're going down there, because you'd get in there and them guys will start preaching, and this hair we're about to cut, we want to pray over this hair, and you'd hear all this other stuff, and you're going, where's the altar at?
Yeah, yeah.
But we got another song here, and it's the name of the album. We're All Kids in America. Tell us about that song.
We're all American kids. I mean, I got to thinking about, when we look at all of who we are. My grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. My grandfather was mostly French. And when I look at who I am and what I am, my mother's family was Irish and German. And when you roll that all together, I've never paid any allegiance to Ireland. I like Ireland, beautiful place. I've never paid any allegiance to the French, beautiful place. But I'm American. And in this country, we are all American kids. It don't matter what our nationality background is, We are American kids. And I think it's time that our country stand up and say that. I love the Cherokee Indian because my grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, And when my grandfather Purdue married my grandmother, his family disowned him from Kentucky, and that's the reason they lived in Missouri, and my dad and him was born in Missouri, because Grandpa was all but thrown out of the family because he married a savage, okay? But we're all American kids, Chuck, and thank God, we're God's kids too, man.
Amen.
And that song literally talks about what this country is, And it's my version, I guess, of God Bless the USA,
Well, I tell you what, listen to the lyrics of this song. I've listened to this whole album. It's a really good song. There's another one that I'm going to play, and I kind of wanted to know where you came up with this one, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Hey,
okay.
Next up, We're All American Kids by Harvey Purdue. And Paul Harvey would probably say something to me. Well, I like that guy.
I like
Harvey
that. Paul Harvey Purdue, that'll work.
All right, here we go, guys.
We're all American kids, born in the land of the free. We're all American kids, from sea to shining sea. Now we wave old glory high under a star-spangled sky. We're all American kids, you and me. I was born in the volunteer state of Tennessee. My mom and dad were born in the show-me state of Missouri. My grandmother was born in Mississippi. She was Cherokee. And I'm proud to live in Arkansas, and my sister's from New Orleans. We're all American kids, born in the land of the free. We're all American kids, from sea to shining sea. Now we wave old glory high under a star-spangled sky. We're all American kids, you and me. Maybe American kids, from sea to shining sea. Now we wave old glory high under a star, spangled sky. We're all American kids, you and me. We salute Chicago, the Buckeyes in Ohio. Hello to Mickey Mouse in Orlando and the Yankee Doodles in Buffalo. And how about your Rockies in Colorado and the Cowboys in New Mexico, the little Hoosiers in Kokomo, the Arizona Indians, they're Navajo. We're all American kids, born in the land of the free. We're all American kids, from sea to shining sea. Now we wave old glory high under a star, spangled sky. We're all American kids, you and me. Now we wave old glory high under a star, spangled sky. We're all American kids, you and me. How about you, Alaska, Nebraska, Montana, Georgia, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, and California?
And that was Mr. Purdue singing All American Kids. Did you get all 50 states in there? Because I was counting. Brother?
Yes, sir.
Did you get all 50 states in there?
I think I did. I tried.
I was waiting for South Carolina and North Carolina. I did not hear them, but you probably did.
You know, I hated that you didn't get more of my music because, man, all of my albums are saturated with songs that I've written about our country, okay?
Right.
The biggest song I've ever had to radio was a song Gary Paxton wrote and produced on me. It was America, You're Too Young to Die.
Now, I've heard of that song.
And it was number one 2 months in a row in '99, and we ended up with a Song of the Year in country gospel music with that song.
Right.
But man, I've got stuff that I've written. Another song Gary produced on me was in the Hometown USA.
Okay.
Great song. But I've got Chase That Devil Automobile, man. You ain't heard that one yet, have you?
No, I hadn't heard that one. We'll do another show. You know, I'm a man of my word.
I can tell you what, that's almost Leonard Skinner's gospel.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, man, that mean he burns the paint off the wall, you know.
Well, if it burns the paint off the wall, we better be careful because, you know, I got too much equipment in here to lose.
Southern gospel has never known what to do with me, okay?
Well, brother, I'm going to tell you right now. I growed up on country. We've talked about this. I growed up on country, and I told my dad one time, boy, did I get in trouble. I told my dad I started listening to rock and roll. And the very first song, we got to New Orleans. I got my tape deck out because we lived in a travel trailer when we first moved back to New Orleans. And we lived in a little place called Violet, Louisiana. It's down in St. Bernard Parish, which is down below New Orleans. I just say New Orleans because to me, that's home. But anyway, growing up, the only thing I was allowed to listen to was country. The only thing they had on TV was country. And the only artist that I could really appreciate was Jerry Reed. And if Jerry wrote it, I loved it. But you let me listen to anybody else because you had Tanya Tucker singing Delta Dawn and Who's That Flower You Got On. and you listen to Glenn Campbell and the Wichita Line, and then you had Conway Twitty. Then you had Roletta Lynn. Conway's talking about Hello, Darling. And Roletta Lynn's talking about going to Fifth City. And you had Tammy Wynette and talking about divorce. You had George Jones talking about he stopped loving her today. And I mean, you can burn your draft card down, and we just go on and on and on. So it was 1983, and we had just moved into our new home in or 82. We just moved into our new home that Mom and Dad had bought. It was a trailer, and we lived down in New Orleans. We moved in, so the first Saturday that I had with my new system where nobody could hear me listen to my music, I'm all the way on the other end next to the road. They're all the way in the back. I can't get in trouble. So I turn on the radio. I find Casey Kasem's Countdown, and I'm like on number 46 of his music. And there was an artist called Prince, and they were talking about a Little Red Corvette. Did I not know what that song stood about then? I probably wouldn't have listened to it, but I thought it was talking about a Little Red Corvette. And, I should have known better, but I didn't know what I know now. But anyway, I started listening to that, and I started getting into this music, and speaking of Blondie, the Cars, and, et cetera.
Yeah.
I come in, and my dad said, "What are you listening to?" And I said, "I'm listening to Casey Kasem's Countdown. Hand me your radio." Me and you are going to the living room. And I got the lecture of my life talking about music. And Daddy said, "Well, that's drugs and rock and roll and all that other stuff." And I said, "What's the difference of listening to drugs and rock and roll and alcohol and listening to country music and talking about who's cheating, who's cussing, who left their cigarettes at the bar last night, and you had an affair with somebody? What's the difference?" So I backed away from that, didn't let him know, and I listened to Bayou Gospel Radio, which was nothing but jazz. No no words, just music. How can I go wrong with that? Well, I guess I got in trouble again.
One thing that I know for a fact, I know that you're from Louisiana.
How'd you know that?
The way you say New Orleans. Because being from Memphis, we say New Orleans,
Yeah.
And my sister and them, they moved to Belle Chase, Louisiana in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And they come out talking different, too. New Orleans. New Orleans,
I'm going to tell you, Harvey, people say, "Oh, no, you're not from Louisiana." And I said, "Listen, do you eat mud bugs?" They, "Oh, no, you don't know what you're missing." have you ever...
Now, see, you mentioned something, brother, about music.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Memphis at a wonderful time. I was born there in 1951, St. Joseph Hospital, which is now a part of the St. Jude complex.
Right.
But at that time, when I was growing up, Elvis came out, Jerry Lee Lewis. I got to know Jerry Lee Lewis pretty well, him and his family, because his mother came to my dad's church. But what a lot of people didn't realize, the one thing that happened in the mid to late 60s is the real Nashville sound was created. Before that, in Nashville, you had the sound of Hank Williams, and you had a different sound. But what happened is the real Nashville sound came together when you took musicians out of Memphis and you put them with Nashville, and it changed the beat of the song. The drums changed. Everything changed because there were some of those musicians that I knew, and they were some of the greatest studio pickers in Nashville, Tennessee. They came out of Memphis, and they had played on a whole lot of the old Motown stuff,
Right.
And there was one guy named Reggie Young. You ever heard of Reggie Young?
I've heard of him.
Man, look him up. He was on Don't Let the Smoke Get in Your Eyes and everything else. But Reggie used to, on Thursday night about Well, every other month we would play at the Lions Club. My family band would, and Reggie would come and play lead guitar for us, and Glenn Tice would play steel. And Reggie played a big orange Gretsch, man, and he could hit licks like nobody else. And he was such a nice guy, because we would ask him after, hey, Reg, how you do that? And he'd hand us that guitar, his guitar. And he'd say, okay, now here's what you got to do. Well, he had a tragedy happen in his life, and he ended up moving to Nashville with his children. Right. And he became one of the greatest Nashville musicians, guitar players to ever be, okay?
You know, when you say...
And what happened is you created a brand new sound. The Jordanaires created what was called the number system, okay?
Yeah.
Because the reason they created a number system is because those old boys from the hills of Tennessee and from Memphis and all that, they could play rock and roll, but they could not read one note of sheet music, okay? So the Jordanaires decided they would come up with a number system. Ever since then, Nashville, all those musicians write number charts and play from that chart.
Wow.
But that era of time was Nashville musicians and Memphis musicians came together, and you ended up with that sound that was like on the Patsy Cline, okay? I go out walking after midnight.
Yeah.
And you ended up with that heavy country sound like old George Jones and Conway Twitty and all of them. It changed it completely, you know.
Well, you know, there was a place in Louisiana that everybody had to go to if they came through Louisiana.
Yes.
And that was down, I believe it was in Slidell, Louisiana, where they had the Louisiana Hayride.
Louisiana Hayride was at one time as big as the Opry, you know.
Oh yeah, and I remember I've seen some of the old videos that they had when they did a little bit of the video and stuff.
Yes.
And you of course, we all know that the great Hank Williams went through there. Marty Robbins went through there. A very early Johnny Cash went through there. And Elvis Presley was on the Louisiana Hayride a couple of times.
You know, a lot of people don't realize Blue Suede Shoes, Carl Perkins and his brothers had a hit on that.
Right.
It was a top 40 hit. And they were booked to do the Arthur Godfrey show in New York, and they had a car wreck. Well, they were booked to do the Louisiana Hayride, and they weren't able to do it. Well, the song was so popular that they began to ask if anybody could do the song. At that time, Elvis worked as like a bellhop there.
Yeah.
He got to sing every now and then. He said, I can do it. Well, that put Elvis on the map. A lot of people don't realize that. Carl Perkins, a great guy, man, a great Christian, played for the Beatles and everything. I literally seen the paper bag he wrote Blue Suede Shoes on.
Oh, wow.
I saw it. And him and his brother had played in some places, you know. And he wrote it from a guy. He said this guy had the prettiest girl there at the dance. But he bought him a new pair of Blue Suede shoes. And said they're dancing. And all of a sudden he backed up and said, hey, baby, don't step on my Blue Suede shoes. And Carl Perkins said, I said, boy, there's a song. And he said, I went home that night and wrote it. And I saw the brown paper bag, okay?
Right.
That he wrote Blue Suede Shoes on. But Elvis, Carl Perkins said at first he was really upset that Elvis had recorded that song and it was going so big. And he said, I was upset until I started getting those royalty checks, you know, for like $12,000.
You know, I heard...
And this is back in the late 50s, man. And $12,000, you know what that was?
That's money in the bank.
And he said, all of a sudden, I got a call from Sam Phillips, and I went down there, and he handed me the keys to a brand new Cadillac.
Yep.
And he said, I decided I liked Elvis, okay?
Well, you know, I remember way back in the 80s when Carl Perkins was still alive. And he was on one of those things that was back like in 79 or 1980 when Daddy first got his first big entertainment center after he got hurt. And Daddy's sitting in there, and they're recording on 8-track tapes. This tells you how far long back ago it was, because he had a cassette player up on tape, and he had an 8-track tape. So Daddy was recording this, and it was kind of like Farm Aid back in the day, but this was all country music. And Carl Perkins got up there, and he was talking about what you just talked about, how bad he hated Elvis. He said, I couldn't stand him. And I noticed later in the years, he did the same thing to Jerry Reed. And, back in the 60s, and how Jerry, he didn't take me on tour like he did Jerry, but he sure did. And a lot of people didn't know that Jerry Reed was, he cut 2 songs, U.S. Mail, and there was another song that he cut of Jerry Reed's that went platinum. And Jerry Reed was talking about, I know we bumped off track here, but how Elvis had touched the industry as much as he did with the Jordanaires, because Jordanaires sung backup to Elvis. And some people,
do you know where those backup singers actually started with?
Who's that?
Farron Young and Marty Robbins.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And Sonny James, if you remember, Sonny James had backup singers.
I did.
And, that's where all that came from. A lot of people didn't realize Jimmy Dean, when he did his stuff, Big John and all that, the 4 guys backed him up on that. It was the 4 guys.
Oh, wow.
And, the Jordanaires and Elvis really created something.
Oh, yeah, they did.
And you got to remember something, man. Sun Records, and I recorded the song there back in the 90s just to record there. A guy pitched me a song, and it was a cowboy song. He was out of Dallas, and he pitched me that song, said, well, I want you to do it. And it was Leanne Rimes' band on the track. So we went to Sun Records. And I had the same engineer that had been on Jerry Lewis. His name was Roland. And the old man came in there and he said, I want to engineer this for Harvey Purdue. I said, man, but you wouldn't believe what a thrill that was, man. His name was Roland James. And to have old Roland sitting there, and Roland was up close to 80 years old, and he said, when I heard you coming here, boy, I wanted to engineer it. And I thought, what an honor, man, to be there in Sun Studio, okay? And after that, they made it just kind of a walkthrough deal. Every now and then they record in it. But you got to remember, you take Memphis, you take Louisiana, you take the hills of Tennessee and Georgia, and you throw that together, and you came up with the Grand Ole Opry, okay?
Well, not only did you come up with the Grand Ole Opry, you also got to remember when this time of era was around, Memphis just started popping. Memphis, Nashville, Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta, and even parts of Florida, because these areas is where the gospel, or not the gospel, but where the country train and the blues and the rock and roll of the early rock and roll, that's where it got started.
I can remember, as a child, Mama would play the radio, and you didn't have a gospel station, you didn't have a country station. It was country music, and about every third song was a gospel song. And I grew up on the Louvin Brothers.
Wow.
That was from Alabama. And, man, I remember that. And, we would be singing, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And one of the first songs I sang with my daddy when I was 3 years old was a Louvin Brothers song, okay?
Right.
And Daddy and I would do the Louvin Brothers. And they were so good. The harmony was unreal, it was unbelievable. But when you take that mesh that actually made the Grand Ole Opry, now, I don't go back to the beginning of the Opry, but I have some friends that did, and they're passed away now. But Herman Crook and the Crook Brothers, do you remember them?
I remember hearing of them.
They were the square dance band.
Oh, wow.
When the dancers come out. the Ralph Sloan Dancers. You remember?
Uh-huh.
Well, that was the Cook brothers who, before the Opry, was on the National Barn Dance, and they were called the Fruit Jar Drinkers.
Wow.
And that was before the Lineman Auditorium, okay?
Right.
But Herman Cook had Alzheimer's, and his son Rocky and I became good friends, and Rocky was my manager for a while. And he would bring his daddy on the Opry stage, and Mr. Cook didn't even know hardly anybody back there. But you could walk him out with his harmonica and put him on that stage with that band, and he never missed a lick, man.
Wow.
It was amazing. And he'd worked there in Nashville, and he worked for RJR Tobacco Company. And, you know, he wouldn't quit his job and retire from there because they told him he couldn't make no money in the music business.
Boy, he showed them.
But I can tell you, man, God let me be in Memphis at a great time. He let me be in Nashville at a great time. And I don't know if you realize it, but my first Nashville album was produced by Henry Slaughter.
Oh, wow.
One of the greatest piano players in the world, okay? And Henry signed me to their label. And I believe I have the first country gospel album to ever come out of Nashville, Tennessee in 1983. And it went out to radio, and the next thing I knew, I was getting calls from the Grand Ole Opry. And my music was being sang on the Grand Ole Opry, okay?
Cool.
And, I mean, I had a song that come out called, I actually did a 4-song mini album with Henry to start it out. And God of Abraham hit like a ton of bricks. And I had wrote it driving to Oklahoma about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it sounded like Eastbound and Down, you know? And it had old Bruce Watkins playing the banjo on the front of it. Almost was dueling banjos, okay?
Yeah.
And we were cutting it, and one of them said, boy, that's close to Jerry Reed's song. And we figured out on the 4th note, he went up, we went down, okay?
Yep.
And Henry said, we got it, boy. You don't have to worry about it, okay? you know. But I've always been, in my gospel, I've always leaned toward country. Always have.
Right.
You know, and I really appreciate you, man, and your interviews and all. I really appreciate it, brother.
Well, we got one last song we got to get out of here before we got to pack it up and hit the dusty trail.
All righty.
And this one song, I've been trying to figure out how you got so far out there with moonwalking.
Michael Jackson was moonwalking, wasn't he?
Well, I thought about that, and then I said, knowing you and the connections you got, you may have flew up on an astronaut and maybe went to the moon and maybe
I got to meet John Glenn, man. I got to meet my all-time favorite hero when I was in the 3rd grade. He circled the earth in Friendship 7.
Yeah. And
I was an airport manager in Nashville. This was in the late 80s. And I heard a call come in on the intercom that they were wanting a rental car for Mr. John Glenn.
Oh, wow.
And I had to go see if that was him. And he got off of a Piper Baron that he was flying. And he got off of there, and I said, welcome to Nashville, because I was a manager, and talked to him a little bit, and I said, I don't mean to make you sound old, but in the 3rd grade, I sat and watched you circle the earth on a black and white little TV. And I said, you've always been one of my heroes. And I said, all I want is your autograph. Chuck, he was so nice to me, man.
Well, I'll tell you.
Think from the 3rd grade, you know, I got to meet one of my all-time heroes, you know. And you wouldn't believe how many times as a kid, man, I was John Glenn circling the earth, you know.
Well, you notice that you said John Glenn. One of my favorite heroes is that I was named after my grandfather. And
yes.
I had my dad's first name, I had my grandfather's middle name. And everybody said, well, why don't you ever want to use your middle name? And I said, can you imagine somebody being called this growing up? And I had a teacher that was down in Louisiana when I was, people would make fun of him because my middle name, because one of the classes, they had 3 Charleses. And the first Charles, he went by Charles. Second Charles went by Chuck. They wouldn't let you go by Chaz back then because they just didn't believe in that. And
now, your middle name was what?
Elwood.
Okay.
And so I
had trouble with my name in school because when I got in high school, I went to Westwood School in Memphis, and our mascot, somebody had given the school a Texas Longhorn steer.
Yeah.
Well, I was named after my daddy and grandpa, Harvey, my great-grandfather's name, my daddy's name. But my dad's dad was named Alonzo.
Okay.
So I was Harvey Alonzo Purdue Jr., and they named that stupid steer Alonzo.
Oh, my goodness.
But, after I realized who I was in 76, I found my great-grandfather's legacy, and I'm so proud to be Harvey Alonzo Purdue. You know that?
Well, and, let me tell you something. My grandfather, he was one of the greatest men that I ever knew. Both of my grandfathers. My grandfather was named Deward, and Papa was named Elwood. And
yeah.
But back in the day, you got picked on. If it was a woodchuck wood or anything else like that, it had anything to do with wood, Elwood was always there.
Oh yeah.
So I had a teacher pull me to a side one time, and he says, "You should be honored to have that name." He said, "There is an American hero that is called by your name. Not only does he have your first name, he has your middle name."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, who would that be?" He said, "He is only one of the greatest pilots of all time. He has broke the sound barrier and everything else." And I'm sitting there going, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Why ain't he an astronaut? And he was too short to be an astronaut. That's the only reason he didn't get in. But his name was Chuck Yeager. And his original name was Charles Elwood Yeager. And he went by Chuck.
Do you know, when I was working at the airport in Nashville, I was manager at Huntsville, too, in Savannah, Georgia, and Columbus.
I was born in Columbus.
I got to meet Chuck Yeager, believe it or not.
Did you? I heard he was a real
But
nice guy.
I also got to meet the pilot of the X-15.
Oh, wow.
And, man, what an honor to meet those people, And when you look at your name, man, just think the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
Elwood, man.
That's it. Well, and as you can tell, we're on live radio, and my Pomeranian's barking at the newest thing that just talked. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this last song in, Brother Harvey.
All right.
I believe I hear a little blues in this one here, guys.
Sitting on the front porch of a mama's house, the cricket started singing. Now the sun was going down. She put her arms around me and said, "Let's take a stroll." We held each other tight as we walked down that country road. Was moonwalking with my baby by my side. I was moonwalking under a star-spangled sky. There's something about love in the moonlight. The moon was out bright. I was walking my baby tonight. The moon started peeking from over the hill as we walked in the moonlight. Boy, what a thrill. The stars began to twinkle from heaven up above. Our hearts beat as one, and we fell in love. I was moonwalking with my baby by my side. I was moonwalking under a star-spangled sky. There's something about love in the moonlight. walking my baby tonight. I like moon walking. I'm a moon walking. I'm a moon walking. I'm a moon walking. If the moon's out bright, I'll be walking my baby tonight.
And that was Moonwalking by Mr. Harvey Purdue. Guys, let me tell you something. If you're ever in the area where Harvey Purdue is, let me tell you, this is a legendary guy. He is awesome. I've spent several hours with him on the phone, and including today. And it's been a privilege to have you on the Chck Bryant Show, Harvey.
Well, Brother Chuck, I sure appreciate it. And, we'll talk some more, but the Linden Circle Theater in Memphis, I was on it at 15 and 16, billed as the Little George Jones, and T.G. Shepard come off of that, and even Conway Twitty. So, I mean, man, we go back a ways,
Yeah. Well, the biggest artist that I've interviewed that was back in December was, and we talked about this, and we'll talk about this for a minute, then we got to wrap our show up. But anyway, the biggest artist I ever got to interview besides you and Lacey J. Dalton was I think he was one of the greatest fiddle players that I've ever picked. And I've met rock and roll stars, I've met country stars, I've met one of the greatest harmonic players that I've ever met was Charlie McCoy.
Oh man! Yeah.
And I met the lead singer of AC/DC. I've got to meet Ron Zamber of Cheap Trick, and I've got to meet John Oliva for John Oliva Payne, and I mean the list goes on and on. But sitting and talking with you is like opening up a encyclopedia of artists that are no longer with us. And I got to meet with Charlie, talk with Charlie Daniels for a while, but I've really enjoyed our times that we've had together, especially the other night how we talked about your trip in becoming a pastor, and brother, I'm gonna tell you right now, the Cowboy Church that you have, it would be an honor to come and just sit in the presence while you're preaching or something someday, and. But it's been an honor to have you on the Chck Bryant Show.
Well, it is my honor, and I'm humbled of what you say because, man, I'm just an old sinner saved by grace. Without Jesus, I'd be a crazy man, But I thank God for His grace and mercy. And, he was talking about people you met. As a teenager, I played music in and around Memphis, and we had these little bands, and I got to meet a few of the black artists at that time, and I'd left Memphis and went back and took a church in 96 and pastored there for 6 years before I came here. And we were sitting at a Steak and Shake in South Haven, Mississippi one Sunday, and we'd walked in, about 6 or 7 of us, and an older black man really dressed, dressed up. He had the little top hat and had the spats on his shoes, and he waved at me when I come in. And we was sitting there talking, church folks, and we was eating, and all of a sudden he come over and he pulled up a chair and he sat down and he said, "You remember me, boy?" And I said, "Boy, you look familiar." He said, "I remember when you was a kid playing music down there in Memphis, different places." And I said, "Yeah." It was Isaac Hayes, man.
Wow. Well,
he grabbed me and hugged me, and I hugged him. He said, "Boy, you don't know how wonderful it is to see you." He said, I told him what I was doing, and he said, "Praise the Lord, man." He said, "I remember you as a teenager, boy." And you know how good it made me feel? Everybody at that table, after he hugged me and he left, they said, We didn't know you knew Isaac Hayes. I said, I didn't know that was Isaac Hayes. I knew that was somebody, you know.
What?
But it was Isaac Hayes, man. And, you know, God has let me meet some wonderful,
Yeah.
including you, my brother.
I appreciate
including
that. You talking about great piano players earlier. I've met Floyd Kramer's grandson, Jason.
Man.
And Jason can play just like his daddy or his grandpa. And, you know, if you go back and you was watching Jason growing up in the late 80s and the 90s, you know, when the kid was out there playing with his grandpa, he was playing just as good. But one of the thrills of living in Louisiana and knowing that I was going past his place all the time, I was at a place in New Orleans one night, and you had one of those little side places. They used to call them a juke joint back in the day, but at one of those little places on the French Quarter, they had a jam session. And in that night, in that jam session, was Chuck Mangione. I love to hear him play the trumpet. And so they started out. Pete Fountain was there before Pete Fountain got his club down in New Orleans. This is in the early 80s. And I'm sitting there, and next thing you know is one of the guys that was the late Louis Armstrong's grandson was playing there. He was very young. And so they were sitting in there, and they just, you know, jump, you know, wah, 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 on the trumpet and the trombone. And they said, guys, we got a treat for you in just a little while, so you're going to have to stick around and hear what the treat is. And everybody's sitting there. Oh, is it Fats Domino's coming in tonight? Because he usually comes in here and stuff. And I'm like, who? You got to be kidding. Fats Domino's going to be here tonight? I'm staying. So a little while, the piano was out there. They rolled the thing back, and Fats Domino had been diagnosed with diabetes a long time ago. And I mean, Mom took care of him when he was in the hospital when she was in nursing school, and that was in '84. And he came in, and Buddy, they just started. He was playing Blueberry Hill. They joined in with him, and then there was a guitar that was a big player back then. I didn't know who he was, but he was from Louisiana. And by the time you got done, you had 15 artists on the small stage, and everybody was just jamming. And it was way in the morning, and when I talk way in the morning, it's like 2 o'clock. And I got wrapped up in that music, Harvey. Listen to them. And they, you know, they wasn't playing country. They wasn't playing rock and roll. They were just playing instruments. And being from Louisiana, I love to listen to the jazz, and I always have. And I was sitting there listening to that, and they started pronouncing names that I'd never even heard of. And they looked over and said, and this is the late, great Louis Armstrong's grandson. Don't he sound just like it? And he stepped back and played a few bars from that. And it's Chuck Mangione. I didn't even know who Chuck Mangione was at that time. And, you know, these is when these guys are really getting out. And that was an honor to me. And getting to meet you and the things that you've told me, how you met Kenny Henson, Ronnie Henson, and some of the great people in gospel music, country gospel music, and everything else. To me, it's an honor to be able to interview you, and I'm going to have you back again, I'm sure of that.
Well, you just say when, brother, because I thoroughly enjoy this. You know, I've been asked over the years why I didn't write a book about, you know, what I have done in the music business that I've met, because God let me meet so many great people. It was just unbelievable, you know. And it is, I met Wayne Newton and all those kind of people. And tell you this before you go, Wayne Newton had a trumpet player that was a Yankee from New York.
Yeah.
And he married some gal from Louisiana.
Uh-oh.
So they came into Nashville and got off the airplane, and we walked out to meet them, my guys. And I looked at Wayne. I said, hey, how y'all doing? And that guy looked at me, and he said, y'all. And he had that New York accent. And I said, what's wrong with y'all? He said, I hear y'all all the time. I said, what do you mean? He said, I married some woman from down in Louisiana, and that's all y'all can say is y'all. Can't you say you all? I said, hey, buddy, you're here now. You got to talk like us, you know.
You know, it's so funny because you mentioned that. Now we know why Garth Brooks spent all that money calling Louisiana.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, brother, it's been an awesome. Hang on just one
Well,
second.
brother, it is an honor to talk with you. And, man, I've got hours upon hours we could talk about because God's blessed me over the years, you know. And I've met some of the most wonderful people in the world, you know.
All right, well, hang on there. Let me wrap up the show. Just stay where you're at. Hey, guys,
All right,
we've
brother.
been on the radio today or on WOTG TV and WOTG Radio. And it's an honor to, when you sit and you talk about some of the greats that we've talked about today and the songs that we've talked about, the songs that have All-American Kids and the Moonwalk reminds you of Michael Jackson doing that. And some of the songs that we play, I'm Taking My Country Back. If you don't know where this album's at, he is with a record label that we're tied in with, and we'll give you some information when we post this out on our YouTube page in just a couple of days. It's on ChuckBryantandFriend.com. You can catch us on our website. You can go there and you can check out all the other artists that I've interviewed, from Jonathan Bond, Call, and Lacey J. Dalton, and PJ Anderson. You know, there's a lot of great artists out there. Today has been a privilege to be with y'all and be back because y'all have missed so much. And a lot of you know there was an accident that happened back in April, and I can't really go into it, but that's where I've been, and I've been trying to get better. And with y'all's grace and y'all's prayers, we thank you so much for tuning in to the Chck Bryant Show and Friends. And our friend today was Mr. Harvey Purdue. And until next time, remember the lead song that is our song that you'll be listening to earlier when we do it. It's Karen Peck and New River. Let's have a revival. God bless y'all. We'll see you again next time on the Chck Bryant Show.
Y'all be blessed.
Amen, brother.